AITA for refusing to sign after my in-laws blamed me when their deal fell apart? I'm Peter, 38, and at that point, I had been married to Lauren for 7 years. For most of that time, I thought I understood the bargain I had made with her family. Richard was difficult. Diane had a delicate way of being difficult. Julian was always still learning, even though he was 33 and had been given more chances than most people get in a lifetime. Lauren loved them, and I loved Lauren, so I told myself patience was part of marriage. I was the person who arrived early for family dinners and stayed late to help clean up. I remembered that Diane liked apple pie without too much cinnamon. I kept a spare tie in my car because Richard once spent an entire meal making jokes about the open collar I'd worn to a Sunday lunch. When Julian missed a deadline or sent the wrong figures to someone, I was usually the one asked to smooth things over. Richard had a phrase for that. Family loyalty matters more than pride. He usually said it after asking me to accept something no one else was expected to accept. Lauren always had an explanation ready. He's intense. She didn't mean it that way. Julian just needs encouragement. Can you please not turn this into another issue? The last one usually ended the conversation. I would decide that peace mattered more than being right, and Lauren would relax as if I had removed a burden from her shoulders. What I didn't understand was that every time I swallowed an insult to make her life easier, her family learned something about me. They learned that I would repair damage without demanding credit. They learned that I would accept being treated like an outsider as long as Lauren held my hand afterward. Most of all, they learned that I could be pressured through my marriage. The deal at the center of all of this had started almost 3 years earlier. Richard's company was trying to enter a long-term agreement with an outside partner represented by a man named Martin. The arrangement was complicated, but the important part was simple. Richard's side had to meet several financial and reporting obligations on time, and major changes required approval from everyone who held certain ownership rights. I had become a small minority owner after I helped stabilize an earlier phase of the agreement. It wasn't enough to control the company, and it didn't make me rich. It did give me limited consent rights over changes that affected the deal, along with access to records tied to the obligations I had helped fund. Richard had hated that clause from the beginning. "It's a technical nuisance," he once said. Nothing more. I had agreed with him in practice. Whenever a legitimate consent request came through, I reviewed it and signed. I answered Martin's questions when Richard was unavailable. Twice, I advanced money to keep scheduled payments current when the company was short, and the reimbursements appeared in our joint account a few days later. I kept the bank notices, not because I expected a war, but because I kept records of anything involving money. I also kept emails. That habit irritated Julian. He preferred phone calls and vague summaries. "You make everything sound like a courtroom," he once told me. "No," I said. "I make it possible to remember what we agreed to." The anniversary dinner took place on a Friday night. There were assigned seats, printed name cards, speeches, champagne, and enough polished silverware to make everyone sit a little straighter. Lauren wore a dark green dress Diane had helped her choose. Richard moved from table to table like a man inspecting property he already owned. I was seated with Lauren, Diane, Julian, Rebecca, and 2 outside contacts. Martin was at the next table. For the first hour, nothing felt unusual. There were speeches about growth, loyalty, and legacy. Richard thanked longtime employees by name. Julian told a story about his father working late when he was a child. Diane dabbed at the corner of one eye with a napkin. Then Richard stood for the final toast. He waited until the room had gone quiet. "This company has reached its anniversary because most of the people in this room understand responsibility," he said. "They understand that loyalty is demonstrated through action, especially when circumstances become difficult." Several people lifted their glasses. Richard did not. Unfortunately, not everyone who enjoys the benefits of this family understands the weight of that responsibility. I felt Lauren stiffen beside me. Richard turned his head in my direction. "Peter's carelessness has placed our most important pending agreement at risk. I have spent the past week addressing problems that should never have existed. I had hoped to handle this privately, but accountability cannot depend on convenience." For a second, I thought I had misunderstood him. No one moved. Someone near the back set a glass down too hard. The sound carried across the room. Richard continued in the same, even tone. I believe Peter should step away from any involvement before he embarrasses this company and this family further. Diane reached across the table and squeezed Lauren's hand. Not mine. Lauren's. Julian looked down at his place card. Rebecca stared at me with the confused sympathy people have when they believe they are watching someone's private failure become public. I looked at Lauren. Lauren. Her eyes stayed on her water glass. Not here, she murmured. Richard's mouth tightened. For once, Peter, listen before you make this worse. I turned back to him. Are you saying the deal is in danger because of me? I'm saying you failed this family. He said it loudly enough for every person in the room to hear. I had a dozen possible responses. I could have mentioned the 2 payments I had covered. I could have asked why Martin had thanked me by email 4 days earlier for keeping the reporting schedule current. I could have demanded that Richard name the mistake he claimed I had made. Instead, I put my napkin beside my plate. All right, I said. Richard seemed disappointed. I think he had expected anger. Anger would have helped him. He could have called me unstable, defensive, or ashamed. I stood, nodded once to the people at the table, and walked out. Lauren followed me several minutes later. The parking area was crowded with people leaving another event. Car doors shut nearby. A valet called out a number. Lauren pulled her coat closed and kept her voice low, as if the main danger was someone overhearing us. What was that? I asked. Please don't start here. Your father just accused me of wrecking a major agreement in front of a room full of people. He's under an unbelievable amount of pressure. That does not answer my question. She glanced toward the entrance. You know how my father is. If you fight him, you'll lose. I didn't ask whether I could beat your father. I asked why you let him lie about me. Her expression changed at the word lie. You don't know everything that's happening. I know what I did and what I didn't do. Then you should also know this is bigger than your pride. There it was again. My pride. The convenient name for any part of me that objected to being mistreated. Do you believe I caused the problem? I asked. Lauren rubbed the side of her thumb against her wedding ring. Richard would not have said it publicly unless he believed there was a reason. Your father. What? You called him Richard. She looked away. Peter, I can't do this in a parking lot. Then when were you planning to do it? She didn't answer. We drove home in silence. Halfway there, Lauren began texting. The light from her phone moved across her face each time we passed under a street lamp. Your mother? I asked. Yes. Anything you want to share? She's worried about me. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. At home, Lauren went straight to the kitchen and placed her phone face down on the counter. I stood across from her, still wearing the tie Richard had once complimented because it was finally appropriate. Lauren took a breath. I think you should leave for a few days. The sentence landed more cleanly than the accusation at dinner. You want me to leave our home. I need space. From what? From all of this. From the damage. From you acting like everyone else is the problem. I watched her carefully. She wasn't crying. She wasn't confused. She looked tired and irritated, like I had created an inconvenient task for her. What damage did I cause? Dad said the partner may freeze the transaction. Because of what? You know what? No, Lauren. Say it. She crossed her arms. I'm not going to conduct an interrogation in my own kitchen. It is my kitchen too. Then stop making it feel like a courtroom. That sounded like Julian. Exactly like Julian. I lowered my voice. Do you believe I sabotaged anything? I believe what I saw. What did you see? I saw my father publicly put his credibility on the line. He would not do that for nothing. I nodded slowly. So you believe him? I believe you have made things harder before. By asking questions? By refusing to trust people. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I walked to the bedroom. Lauren followed me. What are you doing? Leaving. I said for a few days. I didn't say we were ending anything. I took a small overnight bag from the closet and placed it on the bed. 2 shirts, jeans, underwear, toiletries, my laptop charger. I removed my watch and set it on the dresser because my hands had started shaking and I didn't want her to see. She stood near the doorway. You're being dramatic. No, dramatic was your father turning a toast into a public takedown. Do not talk about him like that. I zipped the bag. She had expected me to argue. I could see it now. She had expected apologies, negotiations, maybe a promise that I would call Richard in the morning and accept whatever version of events made the room comfortable again. I picked up the bag. "So this is it?" she asked. "You tell me." "I am asking for space. You are asking the person your father framed to leave so you can feel loyal to him without having to look at me. Don't twist this. I'm done twisting myself into something your family can tolerate." I stopped in the kitchen long enough to remove my key from the ring. I placed it on the counter beside her phone. Lauren stared at it. "You don't have to do that." "I know." I left anyway. Grant opened his door wearing sweatpants and one sock. He looked at the bag in my hand, then at my face. "Couch is made up," he said. That was all. He made coffee even though it was after midnight. We sat at his kitchen table while my phone buzzed against the wood every few minutes. "Rebecca, are you okay?" A former employee I barely knew. "I'm sorry about tonight." Someone else. "Did Richard really remove you from the deal?" "Lauren, please do not make this worse by talking to people." That message was the one that finally made Grant lean over. "Turn it off. I need the records on it." "Then mute it." I did. Grant pushed a mug toward me. "You want to yell? Yell here." "I don't want to yell." "Good. I want to understand what happened." "Even better." He waited while I stared into the coffee. Then he said, "Do not fight a room full of liars with a louder voice. Use receipts." "I don't know that they're all lying." "Fine. Use receipts and find out." We opened my laptop at 1 in the morning. The transaction had produced hundreds of emails, but I knew where to start. 2 weeks earlier, Julian had circulated revised language for one of the partner obligations. The revision sounded small, but it shifted responsibility for a cost guarantee and contradicted what Martin's side had previously approved. I had replied within 20 minutes. "This change creates exposure we do not need. Do not send this version without outside review and written partner approval." Julian had responded to Richard, copying me. "We cannot keep slowing down every time Peter gets nervous. The revised term improves our numbers and gives us room." Richard's reply came 8 minutes later. "Proceed. We will address questions if they arise." I remembered the exchange. I had called Richard immediately afterward. He had said, "You have registered your objection. Now stop obstructing Julian." The meeting minutes from the following Monday recorded the same sequence. I had objected. Julian had recommended proceeding. Richard had approved it. 3 days later, Martin's office sent a warning. The revised language is materially different from what was represented to us and creates a compliance issue. We are pausing review until the discrepancy is explained. None of that involved carelessness on my part. The opposite was true. Grant read the messages twice. "That's it. That's the immediate problem. So why did Richard blame you?" "I don't know." "Keep going." I found the bank notice from 6 weeks earlier showing that I had advanced funds to keep a scheduled obligation current. I found the reimbursement. I found my status reports. I found 2 messages from Martin thanking me for answering questions Richard's team had ignored. At 2:30, I opened a forwarded email thread from Diane's assistant. It had been sent to me by mistake several days before the dinner along with seating notes and the final guest list. I had ignored the older messages beneath the attachment at the time. Now I scrolled. The thread began with Richard asking Lauren to call him. Below that was a message from Lauren. "I spoke with Peter. He still thinks Julian's revision was a mistake. He will not support it unless the partner agrees in writing." Richard replied, "The partner has already reacted. We need to control the explanation before the anniversary event." Then another message. "Peter will take the hit. He always does when you ask him to." I stopped breathing for a second. Grant leaned toward the screen. "Keep scrolling." Lauren's reply was 4 words. "Just don't make it too ugly." The timestamp was Thursday afternoon, more than 24 hours before the dinner. I read it again. Then again. There was no longer any room for the explanation I had been trying to construct. Lauren hadn't been shocked into silence. She hadn't been confused by competing accounts. She knew her father planned to blame me, and her objection had been about presentation. Not too ugly. My stomach turned. I made it to Grant's sink before I was sick. He handed me a glass of water and didn't say anything until I sat down again. "I thought she was scared," I said. "She may have been. She knew. Yes. I looked at her in that room. I know. She let me ask her. Grant rested both hands around his coffee mug. You can miss her and still protect yourself. That sentence hurt more than anything angry he could have said. I closed the email and sat in silence. Around 3, I remembered the voicemail. Richard had left it 6 days earlier after I refused to endorse Julian's revision. I had saved it because the wording had felt wrong, but I hadn't listened to it again. His voice filled Grant's kitchen. Peter, this family has carried you long enough to expect loyalty when it matters. Julian made an aggressive decision. Perhaps too aggressive. That does not mean he should lose everything over one judgment call. Take the fall now. And Lauren will help smooth it over later. You have always been better at absorbing pressure than he is. There was a pause. Do not confuse pride with principle. The message ended. Grant looked at me. That was planned. Yes. What are you going to do? I closed the laptop. Nothing tonight. That was the first decision I made that I was proud of. The next morning, I called Nora. She had reviewed agreements for me before and knew the basic structure of my minority interest. When I told her Richard had publicly accused me of causing the transaction problem, she stopped me. Publicly how? Company anniversary dinner. Employees, outside contacts, family friends. Exact words. I told her. Any witnesses willing to confirm them? Probably. Any recording? Not that I know of. That is fine. Do not go looking for one. Send me the agreement, the email chain, meeting minutes, partner correspondence, payment records, and the voicemail. Do not contact Richard. Do not contact Julian. Do not sign anything. I wasn't planning to. People say that before a spouse calls crying. I said nothing. Nora's voice softened slightly. Peter, you have leverage. Do not turn it into liability. By noon, she had the documents. By 3, she called me back. The agreement is clearer than I remembered, she said. Your written consent is required for any material amendment tied to this transaction. It is also required before they can change the ownership structure or reassign certain obligations. Can they remove me? Not without triggering a valuation process, notice to the partner, and potential default provisions. They could attempt it, but not quietly and not quickly. What about Richard's accusation? The agreement contains a mutual non-disparagement provision for statements connected to the transaction and the party's performance. It doesn't mean every rude sentence becomes a lawsuit. It does mean that knowingly accusing you of misconduct in front of business contacts creates risk for him, especially if the accusation was designed to force your cooperation. I looked at the email from Lauren again. So what is the strongest move? Not revenge. I know. Correction. Preservation. Enforcement. She spoke as if she were reading labels on 3 drawers. We notify them that you withdraw in formal cooperation. We demand that the false statement be corrected to the people who heard it. We preserve your rights under the signed agreement. We state that you will not provide consent while inaccurate statements about your conduct remain uncorrected. Can I send the timeline to Martin? Yes, but only to relevant people. No social media. No broad email to every employee. No editorializing. I don't want to become them. Then do not. Facts are enough. Nora drafted the letter that afternoon. It was less than 2 pages. There were no dramatic threats. It stated that I had not caused the transaction issue, that the available record showed I had objected to the revision before it was sent, and that Richard's public statement was false. It demanded preservation of all communications related to the accusation and required a correction to the people who had heard it. The final paragraph said that I would not provide further informal assistance or written consent until my rights were respected and the record was corrected. Nora sent it Monday morning. I sent a separate timeline to Martin and the other directly involved parties. It listed dates, documents, and 1-sentence descriptions. May 4th, Peter objects in writing to revised term. May 4th, Julian recommends proceeding despite objection. May 4th, Richard approves revised version. May 7th, outside partner identifies material discrepancy and pauses review. May 12th, Richard tells Peter by voicemail to accept blame. May 15th, Richard publicly states Peter caused the problem. At the end, I wrote one line. I will not defend myself against a story built on lies. I am correcting the record once. The call started 11 minutes later. Richard called 4 times before leaving a message. This is not how adults handle family matters. Call me before your lawyer creates a problem none of us can reverse. Lauren called 6 times. Her first voicemail was angry. You had no right to send private family emails to an attorney. Her second was defensive. You are taking things out of context. Her third came 2 hours later. Dad says Martin is asking questions. Please call me. That evening, her tone changed. I didn't think it would go this far. By Tuesday afternoon, I had 31 missed calls between Richard and Lauren. Julian called twice, but left no message. Diane sent a text. No one wanted to hurt you. We all said things under stress. Please be the bigger person so this does not damage everyone. I sent the message to Nora and did not reply. Grant saw the call log while we were eating takeout at his kitchen counter. Any remorse in there? Mostly panic. Do not confuse the two. I had spent years doing exactly that. Whenever Lauren became emotional after hurting me, I treated her distress as proof that she understood my pain. It was not the same thing. On Wednesday, Rebecca emailed, Peter, I'm sorry. I believed Richard at first because he sounded so certain, and because no one at your table corrected him. I received the timeline today and spoke with someone who confirmed the meeting minutes. I should have asked questions instead of assuming confidence meant truth. I also should have said something in the room. I replied with 2 sentences. I appreciate you saying that. I wish someone had said it in the room. She wrote back that she understood. I did not comfort her. That was another habit I was trying to break. Martin called Nora the same day and asked for an urgent meeting. The partner had frozen the transaction pending a review of the records. Richard needed my consent for a proposed amendment meant to cure the issue Julian's revision had created. Nora asked whether I wanted to attend. Yes. Then let me control the legal discussion. I want to speak for myself on the rest. That is fine. Speak less than you want to. The meeting was set for Friday morning. Richard chose the conference room. He also tried to choose the seating arrangement. Name cards had been placed around the table, and mine was at the far end, 2 seats away from Nora. I picked it up and moved it beside hers. Richard watched me. That seat was assigned for a reason. So was the one at the anniversary dinner. Martin entered before Richard could answer. Lauren sat across from me. She looked as if she hadn't slept. Diane sat beside her, one hand resting on Lauren's forearm. Julian had a legal pad in front of him, but no pen. Rebecca attended because she had heard the accusation and had relevant contact with one of the outside parties. 2 other witnesses were present by video. Richard waited until everyone settled. Let's not make this more embarrassing than it already is, he began. I placed both hands flat on the table. It became embarrassing when you lied in front of witnesses. Diane inhaled sharply. Peter, no one is attacking you now. I did not say they were. We are trying to keep the family from bleeding in public. Nora turned 1 page of her notes. The public statement was made by your husband, Diane. The requested correction is limited to the same audience and the relevant business contacts. Richard looked at Nora. This is a family matter. Martin answered before she could. It stopped being only a family matter when the statement involved the transaction. Richard leaned back. We can debate wording all morning, or we can solve the immediate problem. Peter signs the consent, the partner resumes review, and we issue a clarification that acknowledges communication failures on all sides. No, I said. Lauren looked at me. Peter. I kept my eyes on Richard. I am not signing anything while my name is carrying Julian's mistake. Julian finally spoke. It was 1 revision. Everyone is acting like I burned the whole deal down. Martin looked at him. The revision contradicted the approved term. It was fixable. It became less fixable when your father provided an inaccurate explanation for it. Richard's jaw tightened. You are confusing paperwork with power. Nora answered calmly. In this transaction, paperwork defines power. I opened the copies in front of me. This is the warning I sent before Julian changed the term. I slid it toward the center of the table. This is Julian's response saying I was slowing everyone down. A second page. These are the meeting minutes showing Richard approved the version after my objection. A third. This is Martin's office identifying the revised language as materially different from what had been represented. Richard lifted a hand. We have all seen the emails. No, I said. At the anniversary dinner, everyone heard your version. Today, they hear the record. I placed the bank notice beside the emails. This is the payment I advanced to keep the earlier obligation current. You reimbursed it 4 days later. So when you said I enjoyed the benefits of the family without accepting responsibility, you knew that was false too. Diane's hand tightened around Lauren's arm. We all contributed in different ways. That was not what Richard said. Peter, this tone is unnecessary. My tone is the only thing in this room you still think you can control. Diane went quiet. I placed my phone on the table and looked at Nora. She nodded. Richard's voicemail played. This family has carried you long enough to expect loyalty when it matters. No one moved. Take the fall now, and Lauren will help smooth it over later. Lauren closed her eyes. When the message ended, Richard said, that was a private attempt to contain a crisis. That was a request for me to accept blame for Julian. It was a request for maturity. Martin leaned forward. Did Peter cause the failure, or did you say that to protect Julian? Richard looked at him. That is an oversimplification. For our purposes, it is a direct question. The transaction involves a series of decisions. Did Peter make the revision that caused us to pause? No. Did Peter approve it? Richard didn't answer. Martin repeated the question. No, Richard said at last. Did Peter object before it was sent? Yes. And did you publicly blame him anyway? Diane interrupted. Everyone was under tremendous pressure. Martin didn't even look at her. I asked Richard. Richard's face had changed. The calm authority he wore so easily was still there, but now it looked like a suit that no longer fit. I made a decision intended to protect the company. To protect Julian, Martin said. Julian pushed his chair back an inch. I changed the term. Fine. I changed it because the numbers looked better that way, and Dad said we could fix it if the partner raised questions. Richard turned on him. That is not what I said. You said not to let Peter scare us out of it. You are mischaracterizing. Martin held up a hand. Enough. The room became completely still. Nora spoke next. The record now reflects that Peter did not cause the issue. We still need to address the public accusation, the requested correction, and the consent document. Lauren looked at me. Can we please discuss the email privately? No. Her eyes filled. Peter, please. I took out the printed chain and placed it on the table. Richard's message was highlighted. Peter will take the hit. He always does when you ask him to. Below it was Lauren's reply. Just don't make it too ugly. Rebecca lowered her eyes. Julian stared at his blank legal pad. Diane whispered Lauren's name. Lauren wiped one cheek. I was trying to stop him from going too far. You knew what he planned to do. I knew he wanted to say something. You knew he planned to blame me. I didn't know exactly how he would phrase it. That was not a misunderstanding. That was a script. Her voice shook. I thought you could handle one awful night better than Julian could handle losing everything. There it was. Not denial. Not confusion. The calculation. I nodded once. You thought I could take it. You're stronger than he is. Being strong does not make me disposable. That's not what I meant. You did not ask me to stand with you. You offered me up so you would not have to stand against them. I was protecting my family. I was your family until I became useful as a sacrifice. Lauren covered her mouth with one hand. Diane moved immediately. Lauren has been under unbearable pressure. Sometimes peace requires one person to be the bigger person. Nora looked at me, but I didn't need the warning. I kept my voice even. The bigger person is not the person everyone agrees to bury. No one wanted to hurt you, Diane said. You held Lauren's hand while Richard humiliated me. She was frightened. So was I. Diane looked genuinely surprised by that, as if fear belonged only to the people she considered central. Richard tapped the consent document. This emotional discussion has gone far enough. Peter, what will it take to obtain your signature? It was the first honest question he had asked me. I had written my conditions the night before. First, you issue a written correction to everyone who heard the accusation and every relevant outside contact. It must state that I did not cause the contract issue, that I objected before the revision was sent, and that the concern arose from changes made after my objection. Richard's lips pressed into a thin line. Second, Julian is removed from direct responsibility for partner communications tied to this transaction. Any future revisions require independent review. Julian started to protest. Martin said, "That condition is already required from our side." Julian fell silent. "Third," I continued, "all payments I advanced are reconciled in the official records. No more informal requests through Lauren. No more calls asking me to cover obligations before a deadline and explain them later." Richard looked at Nora. "Is he finished?" "No," I said. "Lauren provides a written acknowledgement that she knew before the dinner that you intended to blame me and chose not to warn me." Lauren shook her head. "That has nothing to do with the transaction. It has everything to do with whether I discuss our marriage with you outside the presence of counsel." Her face hardened for the first time. "You're using this to punish me." "No, I am requiring you to stop rewriting what happened. I admitted I made a mistake. You made a decision before I walked into that room." Richard leaned forward. "You are holding an entire agreement hostage over marital resentment." Nora answered, "Peter is withholding discretionary consent while false statements about his performance remain uncorrected. That is not hostage-taking. It is the operation of the contract your company signed." Richard looked at me with open contempt. "You always wanted this." "What?" "To prove you were more important than us." I almost responded immediately. Then I remembered Nora's advice. "Speak less than you want to." So I waited. "No," I said. "I wanted to be treated like I mattered to my wife. You decided that meant I could be controlled." The meeting ended without my signature. Richard sent the correction the next afternoon. It was stiff, reluctant, and clearly reviewed by lawyers. At the anniversary dinner, I stated that Peter was responsible for the contract issue affecting the pending transaction. That statement was inaccurate. Subsequent review confirms that Peter objected in writing to the relevant revision before it was approved and transmitted. The concern arose from revisions made after his objection. Peter also took prior steps to keep certain obligations current. I regret that the earlier statement did not reflect the complete record. He sent it to the dinner attendees, the relevant employees, Martin's team, and the outside contacts who had heard or received his accusation. There was no emotional apology. I didn't need one. The correction mattered because it went to the same people who had watched him bury me. Martin's side kept the transaction paused for another 2 weeks while the documents were reviewed. Julian was removed from direct communications and placed under outside oversight. Richard was required to disclose the inaccurate statement and the internal approval failure to the company's other stakeholders. The delay cost them money, not enough to destroy the company, but enough that Richard could no longer pretend his decisions had no price. The board also limited his authority to approve material revisions without review. For a man who treated oversight as disrespect, that consequence cut deeper than any apology I could have forced from him. Julian called me once after the meeting. "You happy now?" he asked. "No." "Well, you got what you wanted. I wanted you not to send a term I warned you about." He was silent. "You could have fixed this without humiliating Dad. Your father humiliated himself. You know what I mean." "I do. That is the problem." I ended the call. Diane sent 3 long emails over the next week. Each one used the words healing, grace, and family more often than the words lie, blame, or responsibility. I did not answer. Rebecca called and apologized again. This time she told me that several people at the dinner had discussed Richard's accusation afterward, as if it were proven fact. She said the correction had changed those conversations. "I'm glad the truth is out," she said. "So am I. I still feel awful that I stayed quiet. You should sit with that." She paused. "That's fair." Lauren's written acknowledgement arrived 9 days after the meeting. It was 6 paragraphs long and initially described her actions as a failure to communicate. Nora returned it with track changes. The final version was 4 sentences. "Before the anniversary dinner, I knew my father intended to blame Peter for the transaction problem despite Peter's written objection to the revision that caused the concern. I did not warn Peter. During the dinner, I chose not to correct the accusation. My decisions contributed to the public harm to Peter and the breakdown of trust in our marriage." I read it twice. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired. Lauren asked me to meet her at the house. I agreed to meet at a quiet cafe instead. She arrived early and looked smaller somehow, though nothing about her had physically changed. She held her coffee with both hands. "I sent the statement," she said. "I received it." "Does that mean you'll come home?" "No." Her eyes filled immediately. Are you really going to end 7 years over one terrible night? No. I'm facing what 7 years trained you to do when choosing me became inconvenient. That's not fair. It is exact. I made a mistake. You made a plan with them. Then you watched it happen. I didn't plan the speech. You approved the sacrifice. She looked down at the table. I thought we could fix it afterward. That is the part you still don't understand. What? You thought my reputation, my work, and my place in our marriage could be damaged temporarily because you expected me to stay available for repairs. I love you. I believe you loved having me there. She flinched. That's cruel. It is not meant to be. I think you loved me. I also think you loved being Richard's good daughter more whenever the two loyalties conflicted. He has controlled everything my whole life. I know. You have no idea what it's like to stand against him. I stood against him. You helped him punish me for it. She cried quietly. The old part of me wanted to reach across the table, take her hand, and make her feel less alone. I kept my hands around my coffee. Please don't make me choose in front of everyone, she whispered. You already chose in front of everyone. I'm choosing you now. No, you are choosing me after the consequences arrived. She wiped her face. What do you want? Truth without pressure. Time without calls. Separate finances beyond shared obligations. Communication in writing for now. Are you filing for divorce? I'm filing for legal separation. I need distance that your family cannot interrupt. She stared at me. So there's no chance. I did not say that. Then what are you saying? I am saying panic is not remorse. Tears are not repair. And I will not move back because the house feels uncomfortable without the person who used to absorb everything. She looked away. That sounds like something Nora told you. No. Nora talks about contracts. Grant talks about receipts. This part is mine. We sat in silence for a while. Before we left, Lauren said, Dad thinks you're enjoying this. Your father thinks everything is about power because that is the only language he respects. Are you? No. That answer seemed to surprise her. I wasn't enjoying any of it. I had lost the marriage I thought I had. I had lost the version of Lauren I had defended to myself for years. I had also lost the illusion that if I stayed useful enough, calm enough, and forgiving enough, her family would eventually treat me as one of them. But I had gained clarity, and clarity is not the same thing as happiness. After the correction and oversight terms were in place, Nora reviewed the amended consent. I signed a narrow version that allowed the partner to continue without waiving my claims or giving Richard broader authority. I did it because the revised document protected my interest, corrected the governance problem, and prevented employees who had nothing to do with the lie from taking the full damage. Richard tried to describe my signature as proof that we had resolved our differences. Nora sent one sentence in response. Peter's limited consent resolves the specified transaction requirement and does not constitute reconciliation, waiver, or endorsement of prior conduct. Richard did not reply. The deal eventually moved forward on reduced terms. The partner required stricter reporting, independent review, and direct access to records. Julian lost his title connected to the transaction. Richard remained in charge, but no longer without checks. Diane stopped inviting me to family dinners, which was the first favor she had done for me without attaching a condition. I separated my unnecessary access from the shared accounts, left only the funds required for joint bills, and documented every change. Lauren and I began the formal separation process. She asked for counseling. I agreed to attend individual sessions first and told her I would not discuss reconciliation until she could describe what she had done without calling it pressure, stress, or a communication failure. 3 months later, she was still trying. Sometimes she took responsibility. Sometimes she slipped back into defending her parents. I stopped correcting her in circles. When she minimized it, I ended the conversation. Richard never apologized to me privately. He sent one message through Lauren saying he regretted that the situation escalated. I sent it to Nora and left it unanswered. Grant asked whether I regretted not signing immediately. No. Even with the delay? They were asking me to save the deal while the lie was still doing its work. He nodded. That would have taught them nothing. It would have taught them the same thing they already believed. That you'd take the hit. Yes. There were people who thought I should have handled Lauren privately from the beginning. A few said I had risked innocent employees by withholding consent. I understood the concern. That was why I signed once the record was corrected and the protections were real. But private conversations had been the family's favorite hiding place. They humiliated me in public and expected me to repair the consequences behind closed doors. They wanted the accusation to remain memorable and the correction to remain quiet. I refused. I did not destroy their company. I did not expose them online. I did not threaten anyone or demand a humiliating apology. I used the agreement they had signed, the records they had ignored, and the truth they assumed I would bury for Lauren. The night I left, I thought I was walking away from my marriage with one bag and nowhere permanent to go. What I was really leaving behind was a role I had mistaken for love. I didn't walk out because I had nothing left. I walked out because I finally understood what I still had: my name, my proof, and the right to stop being useful to people who never loved me. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.